Today I'm going to be demonstrating one of my favorite, most inexpensive art supplies. We are going to be drawing these flowers in water-soluble graphite. These two things work so well together. This was my first time using the Arches watercolor block. This is the hot press 140-pound watercolor block. It's amazing, at least for these. I've not tried them with colored pencil or with watercolor pencils yet, or Inktense. I will be doing demonstrations on that soon and reviews. But with these water-soluble graphite pencils from Faber-Castell, oh my gosh, wonderful combination. These are the Faber-Castell Graphite Aquarelle, Aqua something. Water-soluble graphite pencils. We all know I can't pronounce anything. The set like this, when I recorded this video, they were going for about $10 or so on Amazon, so they're very, very inexpensive. If you have not tried these, I so recommend it. They are one of the more fun things that I use. I love this medium. It comes in a pack with an 8B, no, that's not right. It has the HB, 2B, 4B, 6B, and 8B. So you've got a lot of control over how light or dark your pencil is going to be. These are fun too because you can mix them with watercolor pencils or Inktense, which I've done in the past. I'll have a card pop up here if you want to check that out. And you've also seen me use these a lot. Anytime that I'm working in Inktense or watercolor pencils or even acrylics, if I need to use a graphite pencil, I'm going to use these because when you add water, the line, you can erase it basically completely or make it fade out enough that you can't see it. So if you are working in Inktense especially, and watercolor where you may not want your graphite lines to show through, these are definitely the way to go. If you are supporters over on Patreon, make sure to head over where the 1.5 hour version, I think it's 1.5 hours, I don't remember, it's fairly long, version of this tutorial is available for you now. If you are unfamiliar with Patreon, each week you get a new 1 to 2 hour long tutorial, along with access to over 150 of my past 1 to 2 hour long tutorials. That is a lot of art lessons for as little as $4 a month, so make sure to head over and check that out. If you're just interested in seeing what tutorials I have available over there, I do have my video library linked below in the video description. Now let's move on to this demonstration. So the first thing that I did is draw everything out with a water-soluble graphite pencil. That way, when I start to blend with water, I'm not going to have any graphite lines showing through. And I'm not going to rip this out of the pad of paper as I work. It's sealed around the edge. This is a watercolor block, so it's going to hold its shape, dry into place. It was really, really nice to work on. I decided I wanted to get a bit of a bokeh look on here, so I went ahead and drew in some circles, and I will start shading around that. Now these water-soluble graphite pencils dissolve completely, so as I'm working, see how I'm going in every which direction? If I were working with regular graphite, or if I was not going to blend this out with water, I would want to make sure that my pencil lines were all going the same directions and like circles or little ovals to make sure that everything was very, very smooth. I don't have to do that here because once the water goes on top, it is all going to be nice and smooth. It's going to blend out beautifully. As I layer, I'm using one of my lighter pencils here. I don't want to jump to the darkest pencil because that's going to be hard to lighten up. Once you add water, this doesn't really erase it. You can lighten it a little bit, but not much. So I do recommend start light and then work up to your darker values. It's going to be much easier to control that way. You can erase this graphite until you blend it with water. Once you blend it with water, again, you'll be able to lighten it, but you can't really erase the same as you would with a regular graphite pencil. See there, I went out of the lines a little bit or filled in a spot I didn't want. It didn't erase completely. You can still see the line or where I had misshaded, but it's going to be light enough. It won't really matter in the end. Now, this paper, it is not the brightest white like what I use with the Fabriano Extra White, wow, can't think of the words, Fabriano Artistico Extra White. This one is not quite as white. And so the end result, you can see on my finished piece there, it has a slightly muted feel to it. It almost looks like an older black and white photo, which I loved the look of. I was surprised how much I liked the regular white versus the extra white. So that was kind of fun to play with. And I'm not going to say one's better than the other. It depends on the look that you're going for. But for this, it was perfect. So here I'm using a round brush, yes, this one is a round brush. This is a Simply Simmons, one of their Taklon bristled rounds. Just blending out there, you get a really nice soft look. So you can see here, this isn't super dark yet. even though I'm going to go darker. Now, because I'm using such a light hand as I build this up, I'm not damaging the tooth of the paper, so it never gets to the point where I can't add more layers. So I can always make things darker. It's just a lot harder to lighten them up. So again, start light and work towards your darker values. It'll make your life a lot easier. You just want to blend all of this out, and I'm leaving some of my little circle areas in the background light. I'm going to make some darker though. I'm not going to leave all of them that bright. I want to get variation when I create this type of a background. I want variation in how bright those circles are, and they don't need to be perfect circles. That's another thing. Don't sit, you know, you don't have to do polka dots there. That doesn't have a supernatural feel. So once that is blended out, I can dry it with a hairdryer if I want to make it go faster, or I can let it air dry. Either was fine. So now we're going to go ahead and use a darker pencil and start darkening these up. And again, you can see my pencil strokes. It's okay. This will all completely blend out. Notice when I get up to the flower how I outline things before I shade them in. I do that for the most part just to make sure I keep these edges very, very clean. Because if I go too dark on one of these areas that I want to be really bright, I'm not going to be able to get them that light. So I want to be careful around the edges. Just go ahead and outline those with a nice, just kind of firm pencil stroke there. And that'll help me to keep it pretty clean. Missed an entire flower petal when I drew that out, so I had to draw that in now. Luckily, that one didn't need to be too white. And if you mess up and shade something in completely and realize, oh my gosh, this was supposed to be really bright, I'm not going to get it that bright again, don't worry about it. It doesn't have to be exact to the reference photo. Use the reference photo as a guideline. I ended up changing things. If you look at the flower in the upper right hand or left hand side, I removed that completely. Once I had been working on this for a while and it was pretty much done, I thought I was done with the piece. I realized that is standing out. I took a photo to post on Instagram and realized that flower doesn't fit real well with the rest of it. So I went right on top of it and got rid of it. Really easy to make that sort of change with this medium. Mostly because I darkened it. If I had to lighten it up, it would not have been that easy. So now that that's in, look how much darker this is. Now I am working upright at an easel, but you could work flat at a table and use a little bit more water so you could get more of that kind of loose watercolor feel you could definitely get with these. I have to be careful because if I add too much water, it's going to start to run, being that I have to work upright. And that's just because of my back. It's not necessarily that it's a better technique art-wise. Use whatever technique you need to work on, whether it be upright or flat. But flat, when you're using a lot of water, sometimes if you want to use a lot, working flat is a little bit better. It's just harder on your back. So you can see it starts to run there where I've got a lot of water on that brush. One of the great things about this medium is that they are fairly expensive. You can get the set. I want to say they are under $15. I think they were under $10 last time I checked on Amazon. Very inexpensive, and it gives you a full set, all of the colors that you need. So if you have not played with these, I strongly recommend it because it is a very inexpensive way to try out water-soluble pencils. Versus if you jump into maybe a watercolor pencil, that's going to cost a lot more to get a set of those. But these, you get everything you need there. It even comes with a paintbrush that works pretty well in those sets. I sound like an advertisement, but just because I love them so much and I got really excited. I'm not affiliated with this company in any way. Now here's a tip for you. See how I've got paper towels underneath my easel? I always keep those there so that I can always dab a little bit of the water when I dip it into my water well. I can dab a little bit of that off onto the paper towel so that I don't end up getting way too much water. Now this portion was a part of the live stream, so you can see this in real time. I'll have a card pop up so you can check that out if you want to see how I'm moving that pencil in real time. So now we'll start working on some details. I've sharpened this pencil. I'm doing a lot of little dots, little squiggles. Dots are amazing for detail, whether you're drawing fur or in this case I want to get this texture. Dots work so well for so many types of texture that you may want to build up. When I work on flowers especially, and I do this for everything, but really with flowers, I look at them as abstract shapes. If you try to view the flower as a whole, it can get overwhelming. You can kind of lose your place and not really pay attention. It just doesn't make sense. Sometimes if you flip your work upside down, both your reference photo and the artwork that you're working on, flip them upside down, and it forces you to see just shapes, shadows, color value, whatever it is that you're working on, it makes it way, way easier to make things look very accurate and to tackle. And I do recommend work ideally 1 or 2 flower petals at a time. I wouldn't jump around and try to do the whole flower at once. That definitely gets overwhelming. And on something like this reference photo came from Pixabay. I had to make it into black and white. These flowers, there was a lot of orange and red in this and yellows. I made it in black, my reference photo, black and white before I started. And that makes it way easier for me to judge my values. If you just try to work from a color photo, that's really, really hard to see where you may want to make your darks darker, your lights lighter. Definitely change everything to black and white before you get started. And there are plenty of free photo editors out there. You can use apps on your phone. You can use Pixlr. That's a great one. Or, like me, just use Photoshop. So the main goal, or at this point, is to focus on my values. Everything's not super clean. You can see my edges are a little fuzzy. It's not as clean as I'm going to want, and I don't have as much detail as I'm going to want. Right now, my values are my concern. Get my darks dark enough and my lights light enough. Just start kind of mapping everything out. Again, look at that as an abstract shape. It makes it so much easier than just, I'm drawing a flower. I don't know why our brains just go into, they try to take over. They think, oh, a flower. I know how to draw a flower, but they really don't. And it doesn't look very realistic. But if you can just look at them as abstract shapes and copy what you see in that reference photo, it makes it really much easier for you to tackle, assuming realism is your goal, to tackle whatever subject that you're working on. I do the same thing. Let's say I'm drawing a tiger for animal hair. I do that then as well, because those shapes you can get lost in. Now there, you saw that I just used an eraser. That is the Tombow Mono Eraser. I had to erase a little bit here because I was using the wrong pencil. I thought that I grabbed one of the lighter pencils and I grabbed a really dark one. So when I blended that out with water, it would have been way darker than what I needed. So I just erased it and then reworked it with a lighter pencil. Now, something like this, your values are everything. And if you don't know what I mean by values, it basically is just how light something is or how dark something is. If it's not light enough, not dark enough, you don't have enough contrast there, it's going to be very boring to look at. If you can hype up that contrast, your bright, super bright, your darks really dark, that makes the piece so much more interesting to look at. If you keep everything in the mid-range, while that feels safe, where your darks aren't super dark, your lights aren't super light, it feels a lot safer, but it also is not, it doesn't make for a very strong piece. Get that contrast hyped up. That will definitely pull viewers into your art. For years, I didn't think that I liked still life or even florals that much. I thought, it's kind of boring. No. It was because I wasn't looking at enough artists who were really playing up the light, really playing up the contrast. The right lighting, the right contrast, the values being really good, that can make a piece or a subject that you might not think is super interesting, it can make it stunning to look at. Don't ever think that the values aren't that big of a deal. Yes, okay, I can do something where it's muted and I can tell that it's flowers and yay, they're drawn well, or however you want to look at it, blended well. But if the values, the contrast isn't there, people aren't going to take too much time to stop and look at it. They'll look and they'll move on. Get that contrast up. And of course, this is a great piece for that because the reference photo did have high contrast to start with. I did hype that up in Photoshop even more, but this was a good one to go with. So when you're looking for your reference photos, especially if you're working in black and white, really look for something that has high contrast. It's going to make it easier for you to learn and understand values if your reference photo already has that in there. Just picking one little area, shading it in. You can see this is, again, very loose, very messy when I first start blocking in each individual flower. Or each individual petal, I should say. As I build up, these are all going to get cleaned up more. I mean, that's kind of a mess right now. So when you're doing this, if you're like, oh, this doesn't look great yet, it's okay. You'll build up to that. It's going to take several layers to get this exactly where I want. This isn't a paint by number where you just put the right shading or the right pencil in the right location. I'm going to start light and just keep building and building and building darker until I get the areas as dark as they need to be. If you are ever looking to take reference photos on your own, especially with anything in nature where you're outdoors, or even animals if you're getting photos for pet portraits. Early morning or late afternoon are usually going to give you the best lighting, the most interesting lighting, where you've got strong shadows coming from one side or the other. When the sun is right in the middle of the sky, that is not usually, there are exceptions, but usually that's not going to give you the most interesting lighting. So just remember, early morning, late afternoon, when the sun is starting to come up or go down, that gives you really, really nice lighting for taking photos. So even if you're setting up a still life in your house, do that like you've got a table all set up and you're waiting for the right lighting from the window. Again, early morning, late afternoon will normally give you the most interesting lighting. And I know someone will come up and say, oh no, I did it in the middle of the day. There are always exceptions. That's okay. But generally speaking, early morning, late afternoon will give you the most interesting results. So I'm coming back through and really darkening some of this up. So my 8B pencil, that is going to be the darkest in the set. I'm saving that for final areas. I don't want to typically just jump into using that one right away. I like to build up, start with the lighter ones, and slowly add that really dark pencil where needed. And I've got to be careful to protect that paper where I want things to be light. Now, another interesting thing with this one, there is not a single area on this that is solid white paper showing through. It's all tinted with graphite somewhere, everywhere. If I had straight white, it would be a little bit too bright. It wouldn't, in this case, look as natural as the end result was. So I do have everything slightly shaded with graphite. There's not anywhere on this that's straight white. And I had a great question during the live stream. Somebody had asked, can you use like a white gel pen to pull out highlights? You could, but make sure if you're going to do that, like if you had a mistake, I think was the question, you could do that, but it's going to be very obvious that that is a different medium, that there's one bright area. So if you're going to do that, to whether it be to fix mistakes or pull out highlights, make sure you do it all over the piece. Don't just think that you can use a gel pen or something like that in one area and have it look right. You'd kind of want to put those highlights and other flowers around so that it's throughout the whole piece. It would be obvious that it's mixed media at that point, and it can look great. There's nothing wrong with mixed media, but just make sure that that's something that you use everywhere, not just one spot that you didn't go bright enough, or that will look very weird because it will be very obvious that it's different than everywhere else. So again, same thing here, just pick one petal, shade that in, paying attention to those weird abstract shapes. None of this, I mean, when you look at any of these, one of those kind of looks like a weird banana with a face on it. None of this really looks like a flower at this point. I've just got to trust that reference photo, copy the shapes that I see. Now at this point I'm jumping around a bit more. I'm working on several petals at a time, but if you start to get overwhelmed, try to just break it down to one petal at a time. Jumping around as much as I'm doing here for a lot of students can be a little bit too much of a challenge and can frustrate them. So if you find yourself in that place, don't feel like that means you're not doing a good job or anything like that. Just break it down and work on one petal at a time instead of jumping around so much. Now, one reason that I'm jumping around a lot too is I've shaded a lot of these different areas so that I could blend them all out with water at the same time, so I could let everything dry at the same time. But that's not necessarily the way that you have to do it. Figure out what works best for you, which way that you are comfortable with, and go that way. Don't feel like just because this is the order that I did it in, that that's the only way to do it. There are 20 different ways to get to the same end. You just need to figure out what you are most comfortable with. So now as I get towards the end here, I'm starting to clean things up. See how I tighten up those edges. Now I'm not just outlining everything. That's very important. If I put out a darker line, see how I'll blend that into the petal, whichever direction I'm going with. But I want to keep those edges nice and sharp now. Really defining everything. But those edges, the areas that I'm defining, they're done based on shadows, not lines. That's a big difference and something to remember in your artwork. Cartoons have outlines. Real things are shapes, shadows, highlights. Again, coming through, see how just those little circles really darkening some of that up, and it really made a big difference on the center area of that flower. Now, as I finish this up, you can really see there's a big difference between the finished photograph, or the finished photo, yeah, I guess photograph is the right word there, of my artwork versus what you're seeing on the easel. On the easel, I've got a light that is super, super bright, much brighter than anyone would view in natural lighting. This one is taken in lighting that the artwork would be viewed in front of, so it's not overexposed, which is what you were seeing on the other image there under the video. So when I take photos, what I use my DSLR and I just reposition it in different rooms and different lightings to get the best lighting for that artwork. I want to best represent what someone would see if they saw it in person. But the way that I get this is with that DSLR. I don't like taking scans of my graphite work. I used to do that, but I was having a really hard time. Now my scanner just may be bad, but I was having a really hard time getting good scans where it was accurate. The graphite was shiny, really shiny in certain areas. I just wasn't happy with the results. I've gotten much better results getting very accurate photos of my artwork, even with the graphite with a DSLR, than I ever did with the scans. So I hope that helps you out when you guys are trying to take photos of your own artwork. And I take my photos indoors in indirect natural light. And it is always hard getting a good photo, so it may take me 20 to 50 photos before I get the right one with the right setup, the right lighting. So don't think that you're just going to go grab one photo and it's going to be perfect. You're going to have to find a good location for taking photos of your art, and the different mediums, whether it be glossy or matte, or if it's super dark. I may have to adjust where I normally take photos. One location may be great for one type of artwork, and then that same location for something else won't work at all because I get too much glare. So you'll, put some time aside when you're taking photos of your artwork. Plan on spending a long time and getting a lot of photos in different locations until you find just the right spot for that piece. I have a watercolor block from Faber-Castell. As far as just the way the block itself worked, I really liked the arches so much better. My watercolor block from Faber-Castell basically fell apart. Like, it's split on the edges. It's not something I can paint in. With this, I'm able to paint or draw directly on it, and there's a little guy right there. You just stick when you want to remove your piece of paper, you stick a palette knife. Don't use an X-Acto knife, you will ruin things. But you stick a palette knife in there and you just slowly go around the edges, and that lets that paper come off. But you want to work in the block, and that will keep your paper from warping as you add water and as you're painting. So handy. I am definitely going to be stocking up on more of these. I can't wait to try this with Inktense because I have a feeling I'm going to start using these instead of Faber-Castell for those, just because it handled the water medium so well. I sound like a walking commercial. I always do that when I get excited about stuff. I'm not sponsored or anything. I just really loved these. Have you subscribed yet? If not, I've got a handy button right there. It's round, has an orange arrow going to it. If you click on that, that'll help you to keep up to date with all of my new art videos. You can also click on the bell if you want to get notifications when a new video goes up, or sign up for my newsletter. I send out an update once a week of any new videos and some art motivation, all kinds of fun stuff there.